Hi, I'm Dr. Jason J. Campbell, and I want to thank you for taking the time to watch my videos. This video marks the conclusion of Book 2 in Friedrich Nietzsche's Will to Power, using the Walter Kaufman translation, as you guys know. Today I'm going to be doing the last section in my notes, section 14.1. As you guys know, just click the link in the description field. It'll take you to the PDF. Download the PDF, follow along, use it to augment your own notes. So we're at the very bottom of page 77, and this is going to be section, again, 14.1 of Friedrich Nietzsche's Will to Power. Alright, so and this is section 14.1. And it covers notes 461 and 465. 461 through 465. And for further consideration for a critique of philosophy. All right. So the last page then, page 78, which will again conclude book 1 and book 2 of Friedrich Nietzsche's Will to Power. The first bit has to do with philosophers as slanderers, right? Such a good title. Philosophers as slanderers. Let's look at bullet point number 1. All right. The treacherous and blind hostility of philosophers towards senses. Right? According to Nietzsche, there is a treachery within philosophy, and that's the important point. And the question is, well, what is the nature of this treachery, right? So he says that there is the treacherous and blind hostility of philosophers toward the senses. Treacherous and blind hostility of philosophers toward the senses, and this is from note 461. The idea of treachery. Where's my red? The idea of treachery, right? The idea that the philosophers are betraying the senses is an important point. Since this is the last section of book 1 and book 2, it's important to see within context where this sort of vitriolic response to philosophers' sort of antithetical positioning against the senses, where this lies, right? As we've seen up until this point, Nietzsche is sort of belaboring the fact that philosophers now have given into this Christian moral ethic, not so far in terms of sort of religious orthodoxy, but in terms of borrowing the conceptions of all above self, right? Above the idea that an individual's intellect isn't paramount, right? That I am going to supplant my own knowledge, my own accessibility, my own means of interpreting the world. I'm going to supplant that with a conformity to a highest ideal, right? And we've seen for Nietzsche, this is treachery, right? There is nothing more treacherous than, and think about this, and because we're going to break this off. I mean, it's a very short section, but it's an important thing to sort of articulate. Why would you, as an individual perceiver in the world, supplant your own knowledge of the world to an ideal that is said to transcend this world? Why would you do that? Right? Why would you deny the fact that you sense some fact in the world? Right? Why wouldn't you then use that feeling that you have, that intuitive aspect that you have, that sensual aspect and access that you have to the world, and use that to make yourself a better person? Right? Use that to make sense of your world. Why would you not place primacy on that ability? Nietzsche says to forego the recognition of the importance that our senses have in making us better philosophers, you've betrayed the discipline itself, right? That it is a betrayal against the discipline, right? The discipline is founded on, and we know how Nietzsche views the Hellenic sophists, right? We know how he views the Hellenic sophists. Now, in pre-Socratics in general, the way that he views it is that they had a means of accessing their world. And the way in which they accessed their world wasn't in some sort of very sterile and synthetic Cartesian reflection via rationalism. No, it was a very sensual connection to the things that surround us, right? There's a very intimate relationship between the external world and my body as an enormous receptor, right? I'm here to receive all of the information, all of the sense data that the world gives me, and then make sense of both the world and myself, right? And we recognize that Nietzsche places a lot of the blame for this treachery, right, for this betrayal on obviously Plato, right, which was then epitomized in religious orthodoxy as such, right? So, I mean, a lot of sort of rehash. We've done this quite a bit, so this shouldn't be anything new. So that's number one. Number two, rather than trusting one's senses, man reaches every time for nothingness and construes nothingness as God, as truth, right? Rather than trusting in one's senses, right? We have the external world, we have the perceiver, we have this relationship, right? Rather than, oh, I don't have green, bastard. And you know, I saw the green and I was going to pick the green, and I didn't pick it up, bastard. All right. So rather than doing this, right? Rather than doing this, whereas we've seen the pre-Socratics have said that man becomes the measure, man/woman. I have a little bug. Bam, I had a little bug. Alright, man, woman as measure of all things. Rather than doing this, which is the right thing to do, what does Nietzsche say philosophers have done? Man reaches every time for nothingness and construes nothingness as God, as truth. Right? Not even the abstract, and not even the distant, not the foregone. Man construes nothing. And it's nothing as a noun, right? Nothing. The no thing, right? Man construes this transcendental nothing. Man looks upward, in a sense, to nothing, capital N. Man construes nothing as what? As God. Man construes nothing as God. Not there's nothing that is God, but man construes the existence, it's so paradoxical, it doesn't even make sense, right? But man construes non-existence as the divine. And if you think about that, that makes sense, right? It at least remains consistent with what Nietzsche has said up until this point, right? Man, through his nihilistic collapse of any various forms which have led to his nihilism, recognizes the absurdity and meaninglessness of this world. And if you're doing your job right, what you then do is you then engage the world, right? Yes, it might be ultimately absurd. It might ultimately be meaningless. There might be nothing else other than the fact that we are given 50, 60, 70, 80 years to live on this planet just for the purpose of having lived, for no greater end, for no greater good. Rather than allowing that recognition to collapse on me, right, and then sort of regressing into, and I'm jumping ahead here, I probably shouldn't be doing this, but, and regressing into sort of a perplexed, frozen state of nihilism, what I do is I use that recognition to further mobilize, that's an important point, right, to further mobilize my actions in the world. I now become more sensual. I now live in such a means that I access via my senses, as much of the external data as I can possibly